6 o'clock, so we'll get the public hearing started. I'm glad to see you all. I am Rob Middleton. For those of you who don't know me, I'm chairman of the Sherwood Planning Commission. This is a public hearing to hear about the new comprehensive plan, otherwise known as Vision 2040, that has been in the works for the last couple of years. I hope to get 2 things out of this meeting. One is to explain and give an overview of what the plan contains, and second is to get any comments from you all here in the audience. We want to get feedback in the community. The process is going to be this: at a public hearing tonight, at the next meeting of the Planning Commission, we will consider any comments that were made tonight and any that are handed in to us at any given time up to the Planning Commission meeting, and we will adopt a final copy, a final version of the comprehensive plan, and send it on to the council and encourage their adoption of it. It will set the policy framework for decisions made by the Planning Commission for the foreseeable future. It won't be a static plan. It's something that I expect will be amended over time. We can't ever come up with something that's absolutely perfect. In fact, it should be a living document. The last time that a citywide plan was adopted by the Sherwood Planning Commission and City Council, to the best of my recollection, was in 1986. I don't believe that anybody living in the city at that time, or a population of half the size of the current Sherwood, could have imagined what we were going to look like some 36 years later. But 36 years is a long time not to update the plan, and this is what we are going to do now to come up with a vision. This all started, I think, there was a discussion with the Planning Commission late about this time of year in 2017, and we concluded that it had been too long since we had a comprehensive plan and a master street plan complete update in order to guide the decisions of the city. And James Walden, who was at the time working with Garber Farm, I was on contract with the city to provide us planning assistance at the time. He spoke to the council in January of 2018, and he went over the process that he envisioned that the city should take in order to update the plan. The following month, the council passed a resolution approving that strategy, and right after that, the mayor appointed a planning committee or steering committee composed of representatives from the public sector, from the private sector, from developers, business owners, education, to give James a kind of a good broad perspective of the community about what we think is important, about what our priorities should be, where we should be headed. And that committee met over the last couple of years and provided James valuable insight. I think the plan that he's about to present to you tonight is a faithful recollection of all of those statements and all of those priorities and recommendations that have been made by the group over the last year. So without further ado, I'll give you James Walden, who was with the firm of Garber at the time he started this plan. And bless his heart, he went and became the planning director for the city of Conway. However, at our request, he finished out the plan with us, even though he was with Conway at the time. And I appreciate Garber facilitating that work. So we have had both James working on it as well as Kevin Gamble, who is now with Garber, to help finish up the plan. James is the one who started it. James is best to explain this to you and to answer questions. James? Oh,
Well, there we go. Okay, we'll go home now. I'm just kidding. So I'm a plan presentation, and first of all, I want to say for all of you, thank you so much for coming out. I appreciate it. I know it's not always the most uh, fun and engaging thing to come to a meeting and listen to someone talk, but this is a topic that's very important for the future of the community. It's something that's very important for future generations. I'm thinking 1986, I was 4 years old. The last time a plan was adopted, I was thinking about Knoxville, not cities. So that is quite a bit. Again, thank you so much. Uh, kind of reiterate a few of the things that Rob talked about in terms of how we got here and what does the plan do, what is the intent of it. Some of the things that we identified early on that were some of the genesis factors of looking at doing the plan was first that there was really a lack of cohesive community building, meaning that it was not something that was held among a lot of people. There were elements here, there were elements there. We really just didn't have it all packaged in one single item that really could say this is the direction. We also identified there was a lack of I don't want to say identity, but in some ways it felt like there was some lack of identity. There's certainly a Sherwood identity, but there's isn't really a community culture, something that we could all garner around, wrap ourselves around that. As Rob mentioned, we had existing plans that we outdated. I felt a lot of times when I was coming up here making recommendations and evaluating proposals that came in, I said, well, the plan says this, but it's a really bad idea. Or plan says this, or we've got this indicated here. And so that's a really good indication that the plan is very outdated. We're looking at things and say, well, no, that doesn't really make sense. And then also we had a big issue with outdated regions. There were problems with the zoning code, problems with subdivision regulations. And since it had been such a long time since we'd really taken a deep dive, looked at the future of the city, we all collectively felt that it was a good time to do that, to look at this long range vision, help drive that, use that as a driving force for changing the city's regulation. So one of the things that the plan does, it sets community vision for the next 20 years. It provides a framework to update the business regulations, whether that's the signage regulations, zoning code, subdivision regulations, it sets that policy framework, identifies the area for future study. One of the things we knew going through is that we weren't going to be able to take a deep enough dive and look at certain areas just simply because this is going to be a big, large process. So part of this process, we identified some other areas that will, in subsequent years and subsequent projects, be looking at taking a deeper look at certain fields. Fields like Peel Avenue, Washington Avenue, and taking sort of a look at how those function, how they should be developed in the future. This is really intended to be sort of a big overall broad umbrella book. And then also identifying some future communities. So these are some of the things that here's our phases, which is a little bit difficult to see up there on the big screen, but it was broken down into 3 phases. First being community engagement. So we had our kickoff workshop with the steering committee. That was our first opportunity where we got a lot of input. Had a questionnaire that we put out that kind of, for me, set a framework of what are the general issues that folks think that we need to deal with. We developed a community input website, sherwood.planyourcity.com, that's been up and active throughout the process. We did a visioning shred, and through that we broke people out into groups, and they all collectively developed their visions for each individual group. And part of that we did a design preference survey that helped sort of inform that's sort of in the appendix of the document that helps inform kind of an idea of, based on the input that we got, what is the kind of community that we're looking for? What's the aesthetic quality, which is very, very important. And then coming out of that, we developed a vision and developed goals as a result. So our second phase after that was inventory and analysis. we're looking at all the data that you typically look at, looking at socioeconomic data, looking at land use maps that Metro Plan helped us in that area, and sort of also further developed out our policy and goals. And then phase three was really all about plan development and option. So we went through and developed plan maps for our future land use, for future recreation, a plan narrative, and now we're up to that. So that's kind of our project overview, looking at where we've been and where we are going. So to talk a little bit about community outreach as a part of this process, our biggest, as I said, our biggest part of that was the vision charrette that we had. So coming out of that, we had about 7 or 8 groups that were in the community outreach. One of the big things that was identified, a large not on YouTube, and that's where I was like, oh, it's kind of, hold on. So community outreach. So we broke out into groups, and we had sort of 3 areas that we really identified as being major critical crucial areas. First was transportation. There were ideas brought forth like a North Pulaski arterial that really would help get people from I-440 as well as 67 167 throughout sort of parts of North Pulaski as an arterial road. A lot of talk about interconnectivity, that a lot of traffic problems are driven by just a lack of street network connection, where you kind of funneled into some key corridors, locations, and that's why traffic is so bad in certain areas. Talked about places like blocking steel, the traffic problems that exist there. We talked about quality of life. The fact that the city really has a lack of a town center. So Sherwood, is a product of the suburban era. A lot of the growth happened in the era really downtown, really being so that's why it exists in those ways. Fast forward to today, it kind of leaves us with where is the art, kind of searching for that missing part. Talk about what is the Sherwood experience when someone comes to this community, comes to our community. What do we want them to take away? What is the impression? Talked a lot about trails. That was, I think, for some, that was a big surprise. Is the degree to which everybody said we really. And this is a little bit of an aside as a planner. When you go, back 10 years ago when I was going into communities, a lot of times trails was not a hot button. It was not something that was often brought up. It was kind of a very much low priority. I think you've seen a lot of the trail-oriented development and trail development happened in Northwest Arkansas, sort of the transformative effect that happened as a result. With the Walton Family Foundation, the commitment that they have made, the reasons behind them doing that were not really all that altruistic. It's great that they provided that benefit to the community that put so much into it, but it was really about developing a quality of life that did not exist. And so you see over and over and over again, the community that I go to, so much talk about trail development, trail development, trail development. It's a way to sort of engender this quality of life in places where you can't have all of the amenities that Dallas has, but you can have a really nice place. Right? And so that's yeah. Aquatic trails. And that kind of segues into talking about Kellogg Creek. That one of the things that we got as input is that Kellogg Creek is a really major asset within the community that is not really being utilized. So that's something to talk about as well. Community image, another area that was examined was solidifying community identity, increased efforts on code enforcement and neighborhood reinvestment, sort of bolstering historic Sherwood, the older part of town, and using that as a way to capture some of our community identity. The Gravel Ridge and Sherwood divide. The Gravel Ridge was annexed, I guess, about 11 years ago, and you still frequently hear a lot of talk about Sherwood and Gravel Ridge. Now, I'm not a scholar, but if someone's annexed into a city, it becomes part of that city, right? And so it's not Gravel Ridge and Sherwood anymore. It's Sherwood. We're all one community. And so in a lot of ways that cultural divide still exists. There's a lot of ways that we can plan help incorporate and mesh those two communities together. And then also it was brought up about outdated regulations. Need to update the zoning regulations, subdivision regulations. That's another drumbeat item. So we developed this vision in here, and this is probably the only part that I will directly read, but in the plan vision, we identified that Sherwood would be a safe, attractive community of choice with strong local economies, superior infrastructure and services, and excellent quality of life and place. Community one that invests in amenities for its residents and fosters a shared identity of community pride. The city will provide an equitable regulatory process that creates a strong sense of place. So trying with that plan vision to really encapsulate a lot of those elements that we talked about here, community quality of life, with having strong community of choice, is something that wraps all of those things at the time. People really want to move here for a reason, you stay here for a reason. This is where you really see that. So going from there, we kind of broke it down into four main items, those being community identity and image, quality of life and recreation. I'll have to get to the others. I forgot what they are on top of my head, but there's four main core areas, including transportation as well, that are part of this. And so I'll go through each of these, kind of indicating what it is currently and then what we're talking about with Vision Sherwood. So when we talked about community identity and image, the lack of identity with Sherwood, Sylvan Hills, sort of this essence of being suburban in a lot of ways. Sherwood has that suburbia. Talked about community focal point. Some of the things that were observed in our plan process through the steering committee is that US 67 is not necessarily the most welcoming way to come into the town. It doesn't represent the best of what Sherwood is. There's a lot of great parts. Sherwood, it just doesn't happen to be that 67 167 is bad, because there are a lot of car dealerships happen to land, which is kind of a double whammy that we don't really get a lot of local sales tax on. And so that being dealership row doesn't necessarily represent the best. A lot of questions about where does Sherwood stop and where does North Little Rock start. That's kind of a very blurry line. It's a lot of times you'll have entities that use sort of this amorphous term north, St. Vincent North. It's not St. Vincent Sherwood, it's not St. Vincent North Little Rock. It just kind of represents that there's kind of this amorphous thing, right? And so there's a really blurred line between where Sherwood starts and where. And there's reasons for that have occurred over time. But moving forward, that's something that was very high. And one of the things we also identified is that the city's building standards are somewhat stringent, but they're not necessarily ensuring good design. But in some ways, some of the things about the building, the aesthetic standards that we have, aren't necessarily driven towards creating good design, but really are just about the good. So sort of exploring some of the things to ensure that design is also enough just beyond. So some of the things, community identity and image in 2040. One of the things we identified is really marking out the historic Sherwood area. So that's marked out as an individual area within the plan that is identified for further study. It's also identified to have separate zoning regulations, treatment for infrastructure in that area, to really make it in a lot of ways to some certain degree a showcase for the community, celebrate that historic identity. There's a lot of unique houses there. It's a unique part of the community that should be celebrated. But additionally, in arts and entertainment, it's obviously a little bit difficult to see from the PowerPoint image there. But on the purple there at where Country Club and North Hills and 107 come together, the city has passed to develop a home. So as part of that, we've designated on the plan arts and that would largely be developed under a plan development format where things like entertainment uses and things like that would be sort of welcomed and invited during. Along the lines of development, some of the things that are major proposals out of this are development regulations, having clear regulations, ones that are easier for someone to just pick up, read, and understand, so that you don't have to read it or have to go to somebody else and say, what does this mean? Because there's a lot of times that's the way that it currently exists. It's just hard to understand what it exactly. So the regulations would really an intent that the regulations should serve a long range intent of creating a unique community with places and not just not just creating another phase of this. That Sherwood isn't just another phase of X. That we're actually creating unique places within our community that are enduring. And one of the reasons why is because with the normal real estate cycle, what you see with subdivisions is that they go great for a while, and then you start to have turnover and disinvestment, and then they go back, right? And a lot of times that's because it's just a commodity. It's just a house, it's streets, there's not really anything crazy. When you're creating places, there's amenity that is a part of that, whether that be with having parks associated, ponds associated, POA elements that are associated, or having a form of development that itself creates amenity. Where you walk through and shop and dine in that area. But those are all things that create sustaining places and not just developments that have a temporary shelter. That's what we're trying to do. And then with the regulations, not being stringent just for the sake of it. That we want it to serve a clear purpose of what we're trying to achieve in terms of really good. So here are some of the things that we also identified with a city gateway. So addressing that issue of, where does Sherwood stop? Where does North Little Rock start? Along that southern gateway, at this point along the creek right there, so this is on 167, right after the old Best Buy. You come over past Sonic. The city's existing welcome signage is kind of right there by Sonic. This would be where on both sides of the interstate you have fully entered Sherwood. The city owns that property that's right there. And this is sort of a concept example of some welcome signage that could be placed. The idea behind this is that it's very, very, very big. And the idea with that is, again, only a concept, but sort of tipping our hat to the fact that, yes, the Sherwood motif, but also the idea of round top and that being such an important historical structure within the community. So kind of a tip of our hat. So that was one sort of concept and idea that we came up with. Addressing some of those issues of a lack of focal point, a lack of sort of central identity that we can wrap around is actually taking where we are right now and transforming that into a civic center, to where we have a community plaza, a central gathering. We already have parades that come through here. And so it's really, taking that extra step to make this a true community gathering spot. Actually, right down there by the pond, I'm from Benton, but I dated a girl from Sherwood for a little while, and that's where I got my first kiss, was right down there by the pond. And so, people are probably already gathering, but you want to formalize the space. You want to make it a better place. If, a teenage kid is looking for somewhere to hang out, that's where we ended up going, however long. But the idea with this is that would have some more structured parking with there. We've already got the Oak Brook School. We've got the Harmon Recreation Center. The library is being repurposed for the engineering and planning department. And so we could add some additional buildings, either through retail space that may be something that would be difficult to make, but office space, restaurant. But having sort of that everything formalized around a community plaza that is sort of that central focus point where we all Yes, ma'am. The library, it's going on north end of town. Yeah, it's open. With that. Yeah. But so sort of creating that formalized, and then having an enhanced pond, having an amphitheater that's associated with that as well, so other young people can go out there and just get their first kiss. Another is a town center development concept. So this is proposed. Um, this is sort of on the northwest side of Brockington and 107. But really, this could be developed in other locations. So this could be on the east side. It could be anywhere sort of up there, developing this idea. But it was really the intent of this is to be a sort of type of development. If you think about um, in a certain way where the old University Mall is, sort of that strip that's through there where you've got apartments, you've got restaurants, that mix of development. That's called a town center style development. And so it incorporates, we talk about incorporating entertainment with retail, office, grocery, apartments in that location so that it actually creates sort of an active mixed use. So one of the things that could be a big draw is either a theater or a department store. Department stores are really hard to track. I can tell you, being one way, it's very difficult. Um, but having a plaza or a theater that could be something that could be a real this area. So this would be something that again would kind of create another focal point community. It could be a draw. Uh, thinking that in this intersection, in this location, this is going to be a very, very important area in the future of the community. One of the things is that there's another almost 4,000 acres of undeveloped land north of Kellogg. That's an insane amount of land because that almost means that you can nearly double the population in development. And so think about that. That this area, Brockington and 107, really could, in a lot of ways, become the new center park. Yes, sir. Right. For that. So the idea, part of it is having multifamily, and I think in a lot of ways that's one of the problems with suburban style development is that it makes it really difficult to age in place, right? Because you have to drive everywhere you go. And so really a part of this is trying to provide more opportunities so that we would have this type of development that's associated with it. If you wanted to walk to the grocery store and live, maybe we would have an assisted living facility near there that you could do that. Maybe you wanted to walk to this. This is trying to promote walkability and trying to create alternatives to different lifestyle choices. And I think looking at something like light rail, um, you have to have a lot of density for light rail. Very, 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 very expensive. they're probably. I was thinking about making it go a little bit further, but it's a lot of areas. So enhancing the bus transit system in the area, that's something that definitely could help. That's probably a more realistic approach to increase. You said it initially. Oh, erase. Okay, we'll take it out of the table. Yeah, yeah. And we're in a really interesting time as well when we look at the topic of transit because technology is almost and the marketplace is almost changing as fast as anything else. Where with autonomous vehicles, car share, ride share, all of those different things that there's different forms of technology that could overcome some of the issues that you have with suburban style development being so isolated. All those. So there's a lot of different things that could have an effect beyond just development. The next was growth management and fiscal health. That's the one that I was forgetting about. And so now we're currently sort of in the system. Sherwood has the most complex, layered cake of service providers that I have ever seen in any community. I have never seen this many water providers. I've never seen this many sewer providers. I've never seen this many sewer districts. I've never seen this many electric providers. And that's really, really, really something. But it can create equity issues in different parts of it because sewer rates may be really high in one area or they may be lower in another. You may have an ISO rating of 2 in one part of town and a 7 in another part for your fire service, which has a really big impact on your insurance. In terms of electric, those rates can differ some, and some of these things can be overcome. Some of but that layers of utility and service providers has something that can have a really big effect on the ability of the city to grow. Particularly when you look at the service providers that you have south of Kellogg Creek versus north. There's a big difference. A lot of it's Gravel Ridge Heritage, sort of that era of service providers that are to the north. Where a lot of more are enmeshed with the existing city to the south. So we've got some differences there. In this map alone, you can see this is with service sewer providers. There's Runyon Acres, Gravel Ridge, Jacksonville, Sherwood, North Carolina. 5 different people. But that's takes it really big. The city's really got a huge amount of growth. 50% of the land inside the city is vacant, and about 21% of the land is vacant. So there's about 4,000 acres that are available, which is just an insane amount of land available. Now, can all of it be developed in the same density that it currently is? More than likely not. It may not be, but a lot of it could. And for that reason, that the city, really took that bold and brave step of looking at annexation 11 years ago. Annexation is really not something that needs to be a high priority. It's not really a needed highlight of the city because we got plenty of land to accommodate growth. So we're kind of the city should be in this mode of attempting to take care and sort of city building within the area that we have, which is not always something that a lot of cities are in that position. They constantly have to battle or fight. The city's got a serious sales tax leakage issue. Part of that is, that amorphous boundary between here and North Little Rock, and so much of the retail exists in North Little Rock. A lot of the city revenue for cities is driven by sales tax, and so you have a lot of folks that shop in North Little Rock and live in that creates a lot of revenue challenges. So that's one of the things that have to be looked at over time is how do we address that? Is that through economic development, is developing more retail within the community? Is that looking at alternative revenue? Yeah, those are things that are interesting. And then the cities also, we identified stormwater. And so with growth management in 2040, one of the things looking at is leading coordinated master utility and service providers. That really taking a critical look at our electrical systems, our sewer systems, our water providers, our fire districts, and trying to coordinate and cooperate as much as possible. Because that alone, cities can't grow if there's nowhere for the people. That's the biggest issue for a city. If you can't flush the toilet, then you can't have development. If you don't have water supply, you can't have development. And so that is a huge critical issue that needs to be looked at as, can this prevent the future growth of the city? How's this going to happen? The sewer is particularly critical as the Gravel Ridge area controls the northwest area. So looking at collaboration, cooperation. One of the things discussed is a possible regional sewer district with North Little Rock. That's something that can be explored as an idea. Obviously, anytime you're talking about some level of regionalism, that means that the city gives up some level of autonomy, your ability to control. So that's something that would have to be explored very quickly. But could be sort of this larger solution to the issue of having 5 separate sewer districts that serve the city. Another is exploring the possibility of a single Sherwood fire department or a single Sherwood fire district. Again, this is one of those areas that creates equity issues that if you've got one district that has a very low ISO rating and you've got response times that are good, you may not necessarily have the same level of response or infrastructure in another part of the community that kind of creates sort of an imbalance for residents throughout where they're at. And so that's something that plan recommends to be explored and looked at is sort of relevant. But it also comes from an idea of dealing with infrastructure. So if we've got certain infrastructure that has to be maintained for one district and we've got a certain level of infrastructure that has to be maintained for another district, it's at some level you get some level of duplication results. Part of that. Another is exploring a stormwater utility. That this would be something that could be created to generate a revenue stream that would basically pay for stormwater utility projects, improvements that could kind of go on a sustained basis. One of the problems with drainage problems is that drainage problems are never created overnight. It's just a very slow process. So you have development after development after development after development, and you've got this sort of magnifying effect of, well, the drainage was kind of bad there and the drainage was kind of, then so happens you have this 20 or 100-year storm event that comes every 2 years, comes in and exposes this huge problem that was created as a result of these problem developments. And so having that, you have to have sort of this sustained commitment to stormwater where you're fixing those problems over time. Because it's just one of those things that doesn't get fixed overnight. And then additionally, it was said annexation is not really needed. The city should explore developing an annexation plan that really creates a metric to evaluate whether annexation should be undertaken. So if someone comes to the city and says, I want to be annexed, a lot of times for a lot of communities say, oh, you want to come to the city? Well, great, yeah, sign up right here. Well, that's not always a really good deal for your taxpayers. It's not a really good deal for residents. And so kind of developing a plan that says, okay, well, these areas are strategic, but it would be good for us to address these areas. They've got a lot of infrastructure. If we annex them in, we'd have to pay to pave all these streets. We don't really want to make our taxpayers in Sherwood pay for all that. It's not really fair to the existing residents of the community. And so developing a plan that looks at annexation analysis in a way that is for the long-term benefit of and the next was quality of life and recreation. And this is an area that's a real bright spot. Sherwood has one of the neatest systems of neighborhood parks that you can find. Part of that's the legacy of when it was developed and sort of the topography and the layout of it. We've got a lot of parks and recreational amenities that Sherwood residents should really be proud of, that are really, the city has a lot of really good neighborhood parks that are nestled here and there, located that in a lot of areas you don't have to walk that far to get to a playground or something like that. Somebody that has a little pocket park within our own individual neighborhood, that's something I really value. You just walk down there, play on that. You don't have to drive. But the city has lots of potential, undeveloped potential with places like Sherwood Forest. There's a huge amount of land that exists over there. One thing we did identify that's sort of that legacy of bringing the communities together is there's not a lot of parks on the website. Not a lot, but the city has trail system in locations, but it's kind of broken and it's hard to get from here to there. But there's elements of it that are really neat. And then another element affecting quality of life is that schools are not local. So the determination of how your children are educated and not under the control of the community. And that's something that's very important. So quality of life and looking at 2040, with the idea of looking at a Northside Regional Park, thinking that it's probably difficult to replicate the same system of neighborhood parks that we have stretched throughout the community, sort of north of Kellogg Creek. And so looking at developing something that is a big showcase community, a regional park type development on the north side of the community, developing a complete trail system. So trails here, there, and yon. I've never seen a city that is laid out as well to develop really good trails. It is tons of options that are really create a unique asset. Another is the Kellogg Creek Blueway. So in a lot of ways, the community, we've turned our backs on Kellogg Creek. And with this, the idea is really embracing Kellogg Creek as a celebrated and not just a mosquito. That it can be a place where you go out and kayak, or a place that you can go and canoe, or we've got trails that go through there. Great for looking at bird habitat, things like that. But it's sitting there, it's existing as an amenity. We just have to realize that the whole of it we like it. It's something very unique within Central Arkansas that we don't have at the old sewer plant down on the south end of town, looking at maybe a wetland interpretive park. It's not far from the Clinton Magnet School, but that can be something that can be utilized for outdoor education, part of the school programs that happen there, but also additionally within our local schools, is using that as sort of an interpretive parking application. And then additionally supporting the creation of a trail district. That being something that is a high priority. So looking at the trail system, one of the things you can't see here, this is sort of on the north side of the community. And so with here, we've got, I may go up. Okay, if I just break away and go up there for a minute. Okay. So kind of up here on the north side, here's the Kellogg Creek area through there. So we've got a trail running back. Here's Kellogg Acres Road right here, and running back, it's kind of hard to see behind me. So running back down here, this goes back to the sort of the school campus, the large campus area that we have. This trail would run back down here. This would tie back into the Oakdale area down here. This would go back down over the Miller Crossing and all that area. And then having a trail system that kind of ran up north, running along some of these creek beds that we have going here, and then also running along the creek down here, kind of on the north side. I mean, one coming down here, here is Jacksonville Cutoff. Here's the park. It's in the Gravel Ridge area. Coming down along the utility line that's right here. In the middle area of the community, you can see more fully sort of the Kellogg Creek Greenway that we have right through there. You can see all of these lines through here. These are all the sort of existing trails that we've got. The idea of Again, this trail coming down from the north area over there towards Jacksonville, having a trail that runs from Kellogg Creek down over here, back into this. I can't remember what's this creek called. Gap Creek, yeah. Back through Gap Creek, running back into this development. And guess what? We can tie back over here to the school system. So we've got a loop here, we've got a loop up there, we've got a loop through these neighborhoods. And so you provide a lot of walking opportunities for kids to get to school, to different amenities, parks, throughout. And some of this is already set up in easement as well. Looking here, this goes down along power line easement that's through here, kind of connecting back over here. You can see here's Sherwood Forest, bringing this trail that runs along this creek back over here, back and down to that. So again, coming down the power line utility easement, coming back into this neighborhood with Sherwood Lake. Down here is where we talk about sort of the old Sherwood Plant Interpretive Park, bringing trail through here. We've got a lot of existing trail that runs through here with the country club and the greenway that we got, using that, extending that amenity up to Sherwood Forest as well. And then bringing sort of this back up here to City Hall. Again, creating some more looping systems, some opportunities for these pathways. And one of the things that you notice with a lot of these trails that make it such a unique opportunity is that in hardly these situations do you have to actually be along a road, but you're actually going along some natural amenity like a creek, or maybe you're along a power line. So there's not a lot of times where you can be in a community where you don't have to run a trail here and then it's on a road and then it's off and it's on, and it's actually sets up really well. And again, taking the trail down here on the south side, back here down where the North Little Rock border, and bringing it over here over close to the North Little Rock sewer plant that's over here, tying back over here at the Wildwood. This is a huge looping system that can be created. And that kind of brings us to looking at transportation and mobility. Some of the elements with this sort of exist. How it is, we have a lack of infrastructure for future north side needs. This is something that combined with a lack of north-south connections to US 67 could create some really big problems. So if we imagine that traffic's bad now, imagine if we develop 2,000 acres of homes to the north, and their ways to get to the interstate are still Brockington Road, Wildwood, 107. Yeah, so we can imagine. I'm here to talk about the future. I don't know about a specific case or an instance in a very specific location. We might talk to some of the city officials about it. But in terms of thinking about that impact long term and the city growing a lot more, how the impacts that could have on the transportation system sort of highlights the need for more connectivity to 440 as well as US 67. That there's going to be real infrastructure associated with that. So that sort of Brockington funnel that is being created now. Another is the country club in North Hills area. That's sort of a dysfunction junction, I guess you might call it. It's a sort of an odd clustering of intersections within that area. There's no real northern east-west arterial. You get, Peel Avenue. You got Country Club down lower, but once you get up sort of further north, there's no real good way that takes you really east to west through the community. And then there's a lot of misaligned roads in different places where you were going to go here, then you got to jog over here, and you got to jog over here. Those create traffic problems. So looking at transportation in 2040, one of the things that we're looking at is a North Pulaski east-west something that would an arterial road that would come from I-440, US 67, 167, across sort of the north part of the community, not as a freeway, but as an arterial road. That's something that wouldn't just be a pass-through. That was in a lot of ways the problems with the North Belt proposal is that it was really about moving people through Sherwood and not bringing people to Sherwood, right? And so that's something that, as an arterial, could really could help, commercial growth as well. This is just to demonstrate that that picture is actually from the some of the community engagement that we had. That some of the participants said, "Let's go northwest." Yeah, northwest somewhere. Additionally, looking at more Kellogg Creek crossings as it currently exists now, I think there's only one crossing of Kellogg Creek, and so if something happens on US 67, 167, what do we do? Particularly if we got, another 10, 15, 20,000 people living on that side, that creates a big traffic in that particular location that can create a lot of issues. And so looking at developing some more crossings that would help spread out the traffic flows that come from the north. Looking at interconnectivity and access management, using ways, sort of minor investments, to make the city's existing system more efficient. And we're already looking at these things with the connector behind Coles to Land Trip. That's a small little connection. Small little connection, but they have really big results, right? And that's all about interconnectivity, doing that in an increasing way. And then also access management. So you can either make your roads wider and have as many access drives as you want and kind of end up slowing down the function of the road, or you can manage drives and kind of help forestall sort of widening the road in the future. And that's one of the big things about access management is that it's limiting the number of driveways, so limiting the amount of times that people slow down, stop, turn, do all of those sorts of activities, things that create conflict, create wrecks and things like that. That can help preserve the function of a corridor and forestall the need for widening very, very long. Just having really good access. The well access managed road can carry a lot more traffic than a very poorly accessed. In fact, with traditionally people would say, "Oh, we need a 4-lane road," and so the traditional design was always to be a 4-lane arterial. That was kind of with 2 lanes in each direction. And what we ended up finding out is that with a 3-lane road, you actually are able to move more traffic. And it's because when you've got turning motions in those inside lanes, traffic stops. And so you just got a lot of ways of really wide turning. And that's sort of an example of having access management built inside of the road itself. And that last point, changed font on this, so I'm not sure if we'll have to read to find out in terms of looking. So here I'll go back up here and point out some of the work. So some of the transportation projects that are discussed. The Fairway Avenue, runs south all the way through North Little Rock. It's one of those you drive along, you're like, wow, this road just keeps going and going and going and going. It's like, wow, it just goes forever. Then you're like, well, there's a fairway in Sherwood. Like, I wonder why those two don't connect. Now, things happen over time, and a lot of times coordinating between communities can be somewhat difficult. And so, even though that direct fairway connection between North Little Rock and Sherwood can't happen. There are still opportunities like here off of Silver Creek Drive to come down to Fairway Cove without building a bridge that could sort of provide an alternate connection between these. So that particularly even for some of residents in different areas, access in these areas is really difficult. I have a friend that lives over in this area, and always have to kind of calculate, okay, which exit do I take? Okay, well, I don't want to miss here and then go back here and then I have to go all the way around. It just becomes a total nightmare. Anytime you can increase connectivity and make it easier to get from here to there, if you miss turning in here to get in your neighborhood, well, you could just go over here and come up, right? Create something that's a little bit easier. And then also another small minor connection, the Claremont Avenue extension. Claremont Avenue is another one of those long running corridors. Just extending it a little bit further south behind the Pacific Creek Canal so that you could direct traffic down on here rather than maybe necessarily providing alternate routes, helping alleviate. One of the interesting things that I have noticed being in Conway for the last 9 months is in the last 20 years, I think the city's probably grown maybe 20,000, I think. And there's been a couple really key infrastructure things that have happened. One of those is Dave Wood Drive. And that has had a huge impact. Dave Wood Drive is an access managed street. But you know what's interesting is despite all of that growth that's happened, if you look at street after street after street after street after street in Conway, traffic counts are going down, which is weird. Now, traffic has grown exponentially on Dave Wood Drive. If you look corridor after corridor after corridor, traffic is going down. And that's because people have adjusted to the fact that there might be congestion in certain areas, so I'll go a different way. Or I'll go off this other corridor because there's a lot of interconnectivity. And so anytime that you can provide that interconnectivity, it creates a more balanced system that can handle traffic. I never would have thought the community would grow a lot, 20,000 or something like that, and have traffic counts go down. It's weird, but it happens. Another is the Keel Avenue extension, again, with this idea of doing road extensions, making it easier to get from here to there. This would be an extension of Keel Avenue going west over the Remount Road. Right here is the North Little Rock Airport. And so this is something that's also reflected in North Little Rock's National Street Plan, so there's coordination there. That. Up here, this is sort of on the north side of the community. So coming off Oakdale down here, it would be a Kellogg Creek collector that would run north to Jacksonville Cato Road, continue going up north through here, an extension of Arnold Drive that would go sort of east-west. That could be also another kind of arterial that connects between Jacksonville and point further to the west. Now, a lot of these you'll see up here in the north side of town. You'll think, man, there's a lot of roads that are indicated. Well, with this, a lot of these are intended to be roads that support the development in that area. Right? So as development happens, we want to make sure that we get a connection that goes from here to down, so that we have that connection. So while this connection, Oakdale to Jacksonville Cato, that may be one that's particularly important that might stand alone from development, just simply because it is another Kellogg Creek crossing. The extension further north, that may be something that occurs with. Additionally, we've got an extension of General Samuels here that tie back and go up around that time to 107. And then another intermediary collector here that we call the north side collector that would be sort of between here. So the idea is that you have a sort of these almost not super grids, but larger areas, sort of square areas that you would have some level of circulation. Okay. And then finally, areas that we look at for future study, these are areas that really deserve sort of an extended period of review and more looks at them because they're not really fully fleshed out. As you can tell, with the plan, there's a lot of really high-level, 40,000 foot view type of examination. But when we get down to looking at areas like Hill Avenue or Brockington Avenue, you really need to take a very granular look and say, okay, how do we want these individual areas to develop? How do we want to manage access? How do we want what's the transportation, specific transportation functions that we want to have here? And looking at these individual corridors in a very detailed. So some of the areas that proposed for future study is the Southern Gateway area, that being one. We talked about it not being, not necessarily representing the best of what Sherwood is. And so looking at that as a way of encouraging redevelopment. You know, maybe as car dealerships go out, that we have other forms of development come in there, ones that can be tax generating, but also particularly within the area, how do we denote the difference beyond just gateway signage, the difference between North Little Rock and Sherwood. Well, one of the ways that you can do that is to have a definite difference between the way that buildings look in North Little Rock and Sherwood. So having a sort of a distinctive design, a distinctive character that says, oh wow, we've obviously left some place and now we're going into some other, right? That kind of represents. Another study area is the historic Sherwood area, that older part of the community, looking at ways to look at development, sort of rehabilitation in places. The Kill Avenue area, the Kill Avenue corridor, looking at that, that's an area that deserves a lot of attention. You know, in a lot of ways, in looking at the visual preference study or the design preference study, actually took a picture from Kill Avenue and put that in there, and it was a very low scoring picture. People said, "Well, I like this other picture that's here a lot better," and it was because of some of the form of development. And it's just kind of slowly happened over time. That development has happened. It's transitioned from a residential corridor to a commercial. But what you're seeing is that there's enough that has gone along in that retail cycle or the development cycle that you're starting to see that there's areas that are ripe for redevelopment, that you could have redevelopment. And you want to make sure that when it occurs, that it happens in the right way, that it creates a long-term asset for the community rather than a short-term asset. Also, the Keel interchange area, with the construction of Brockington and the 176Y, that really changed the way that the Keel interchange area was. So we really need to look at how do we want that area to look, how do we want it to be in the future, with a different type of role that it has. The Brockington Gateway area, sort of that corridor, looking at that entire corridor, having a potential to be a really sort of character defining nice area within. Other future study areas, we identified that town center area, taking a deeper dive within that area that we identified that concept. The North 107 area, within that area, within North 107, there's a real mishmash of them. There's places you've got what we call the sort of the US 67 highway-oriented commercial that's located within there. Then you've got areas that are different. You've got residential, and so it's just there's a lot of things that are going on within there. And so taking a look at that to kind of make it a more cohesive, identifiable part of the community to really be. So with that, I'll take. Yeah. main parts of the planning area right now. Another one of the big boundaries is what we call the middle operational space. City is under HC, but it is sort of a requirement that the city protect those areas to make sure that we don't have development areas. Spaces along the street. Kind of a big deal. It's short slide. We've got we also got about that same time as a little of this. One of the things United States government said is we don't have regulations to protect the areas. Air Force Base, you know, they're supposed to say, yeah, we're a planning statute is not going to be a happy action. City limits is black. Some of these lighter areas is identified. I went through a lot of the street projects, but on the master street plan, we've got areas of freeway, so that would be 767. We've got principal arterials, arterials, the idea, arterials, don't go arterials, free traffic, example, the two avenues not designated. All of this stuff. Collective streets, sort of the two immediate streets that are a lot of times they become a little bit larger and maybe they get they also local roads. The other big thing are lanes. In the first area, areas not really the other thing is that problem is the water always falls down the result of substances and they get dumped. So speaking to those areas, recreational is rural reserves. This would be the area that we don't have to having service. Building single family, so that's one, yellow, hard area. Next, large scale multifamily, large scale multifamily. Large scale multifamily is those areas indicated a lot of them are large. Small scale multifamily is sort of areas and there's a lot of areas that manufactured home residential city is required to designate area office slash bucket area. You have office bucket. This is really for lower makeup area. A lot of times, all that maybe send area really sensitive. What's the tool on? So those are a lot of the large the big departure later. And so the idea behind it is that the difference between students some of these things partial center would be very highly corridor, highly really largely we've got a few here that are really urban, urban neighborhood center is a confident concept that is very identified through urban neighborhood. Additional neighborhood, and associated with that is walkable neighborhood. It is non-district walk. Once the city park industrial development, there is industrial. They are one of the features that a city has. But better that here long sort of maintaining, not really. And then last is the city area. This is kind of a they call it extended for a lot of these areas is that 34 and marking where they are. That's the same. Now there's a this is something that can fall further study. Around the alcohol. So, I mean, in all honesty, issues, things that I hear. That's why I've heard. That's the reason why there is no different values. I think in some ways we probably are tackling that not kind of talking about for example, I don't I was young, look at it, having these kids, beyond that, is how you really very places like Lafayette, Colorado, really figured it out. Or maybe so I think it's someone with Probably. I think some of that maybe is reference to policy, policy areas. I'd have to. I mean, a lot of those big doctors, they're developing. I wouldn't call them. They're working on concepts. It's based on the idea of safety. It's not necessarily. It's own thing too. Maybe. No, I'm in the plan document. I didn't go through all the street processes. Uh, I can go. I can go through this. So we've got a simple material. We've got a traditional principal arterial in here that has the element of the boulevard, and then we've got alternative with the fiber and cross section, and then also the areas where we call the trail. We've got the communication out with the trail, also the trail on one side. Then we've got also essentially non-arterial expansive that was included. What's particularly important about this is a lot of on football or something like that. It's got icons. Oftentimes those icons absolutely very good. Always have icons in a lot of those areas. And so this is one of the things that we propose is actually if you're going to put icons at that type of overlay, then buffer. We put buffer in that area like this is larger. And here's an example on our field with the trail. Go down to the collectors. So we've got policies in here that require elements on all of these sidewalk requirements, pedestrian crossing. This is 50 one. Bike lanes, trails, if it's on a plan, bike lanes, we've got relevant stuff. We've got a traditional collector there that again requires sidewalks on both sides. Collector with a median, that is the transit feature that having 5 6 sidewalks. create that large buffer for pedestrians to feel comfortable. If we're including bike lanes on a collector, environment, including having bike lane buffers on collector boulevard there. This is a smaller buffer is a super buffer. Five, five foot, five foot, five foot of it. Urban collectors, so this is an area that could be used for urban aspects of the environment, all about this. Sort of the idea, the reason I focus the front place, even if you take the form, if you were really choosing to succeed on this system, it's really more important. It is really good. Example of the urban collectors, of the cycling, this would have again a buffer between cycling or you could alternatively use the cycling here's an example of where you do a trail on the sidewalk. So an example is a rural collector with wide shoulders. In focus, putting options in certain areas where we don't have to buy local street bike routes, something that is something that is actually local street with bike lanes for this is the only and that's because local streets are so the shift on is the fact that those who are not supporting other context things that the local street this concept can evolve certain areas have problems to experience this an example of local street and in each of these situations where you have sidewalk in shared included we always try to provide more space for the officers and then that's sort of fair process where you have people Arkansas regional transportation say they measure all of these processes started with their model so that's kind of the idea is that sidewalks are required in every I'm writing this knowledge that you know, like that. I was thinking all day long. That I think is something. But like I feel why we're I'll keep back on that. I'm a big believer. So I don't want to be what was happening without actually talking. I mean, so much of this is really driven by the vision, driven by so that very well could be one of the really good. Okay, wouldn't necessarily want to go in before we go. In certain areas, you know, within the culture, look at the transportation and the way that it goes. Washington, being transportation is very important. Even people through the people, they also have to go to the
I don't know if you've noticed it, but there's a lot of thought put into this. In my estimation, this is the most comprehensive framework that Sherwood has ever had to guide policy development and development of the city. Uh, the thing I take away from this is that what we've got here now is a very large framework, and we needed the framework before we started getting too much into detail. Because what we've been doing over a number of years is messing with details kind of chaotically as best we could, trying to do the best we can without a larger vision about how all that ties together. This gives us a better sense of what that is. And what came out of a lot of the working sessions up to this point was we think there are some special areas which either have problems or potential, but we don't know exactly what that ought to be. But we need to develop a framework and recommend that we need to be more specific about these problem and potential areas. And that's what the plan does here. James didn't elaborate a whole lot, but it's got a lot of action steps and policy statements in there that suggest how we're going to do it. And I think there's actually one in there that says we encourage those sorts of things that will promote affordable housing. If there isn't something in there, that probably should be there. Because I do think that's important for a wide variety of reasons. But this gives us a framework that we've never had. And I am excited about that, frankly. And do you have anything further you want to add?
Good fun.
Do you have any more questions? I want to really thank you all for coming out, because what the Planning Commission wants to hear is how you're receiving this. Is it making sense to you? Have you missed the mark? And what I'm hearing is that it's making sense. And we can fine tune some stuff and get more specific in the future that we got someplace to start now. Thank you for coming.